Welcome to Hawaii Office of Language Access, an online presentation about communicating with Limited English Proficient (LEP) individuals. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you weren't able to communicate with the people who speak different languages but really needed to do so? I've been there. It makes you feel really confused and disconnected, doesn't it? You end up searching for a way to connect you to the answers you need. Many of the people you'll serve or are in contact with may not speak or read English, or the person may have limited English proficiency. Often, unconsciously, English speakers yell or raise their voice, as if someone was deaf, to ask if someone speaks English. Whether you are answering the phone, helping someone that asks questions in the hall, interviewing clients, or any other types of contact with the public directly or indirectly, you need to communicate clearly with the limited English proficient individuals to determine their needs and/or eligibility for the services provided. Using the right language services to communicate with individuals who are limited in English proficiency will help ensure effective communication. Here's our agenda. Why do we offer language services? What type of language services are provided? How to provide language services? Where can I learn more about language services? Hawaii is one of the most culturally diverse states and has one of the highest proportions of non-English speakers in the nation. Based on the 2019 State of Hawaii Data Book, Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, Hawaii's total population aged 5 years and older is 1,331,641, with roughly 348,139, or about 25%, speaking a language other than English at home, and 161,055, or about 46% of them indicating that they speak English less than very well, classifying them as Limited English Proficient or LEP. Under Hawaii's language access law, the term LEP refers to an individual who, on account of national origin, does not speak English as a person's primary language and self-identifies as having a limited to read, write, speak, or understand English. The top 10 languages spoken by LEP individuals in Hawaii are Ilocano, Japanese, Tagalog, Korean, Cantonese, Spanish, Vietnamese, Chuukese, Mandarin, and Marshallese. There are a lot of reasons we provide language services. First, we want to provide excellent service to everyone, all the time. We need accurate information about individuals' life circumstances to determine program eligibility or understand their question correctly in order to support them or answer correctly. LEP individuals cannot provide accurate answers when they do not understand the questions. They cannot comply with reporting and participation rules unless the rules and pertinent information are explained in a language they fully comprehend. Next, there are legal requirements at the federal and state level. The two main legal bases for language access are Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 requires that recipients of federal financial funding are prohibited from discriminating based on national origin. This includes ensuring equal access to persons who are limited English proficient. Hawaii Revised Statutes, Chapter 321C, which requires every state agency or any organization receiving state funding that provides services to the public to ensure meaningful access to their agency's essential government services, program, and activities to all Hawaii's diverse population, regardless of what language is spoken. In addition, a department or related agency may have to comply with specific legal requirements, rules, regulations, and/or policy guidance according to their program and activity. Please consult with your designated language access coordinator. The failure of an agency or covered entity to provide language assistance services to LEP individuals may constitute national origin discrimination. Under the Language Access Law, all LEP individuals have the right to meaningful access to services, programs, and activities offered by the state and covered entities. Providing language services includes offering and consistently providing ways to communicate with individuals who are limited in their ability to communicate in English. There are two major considerations to be addressed in selecting services: competency and timeliness. The point is to allow our LEP individuals the same access to the services, programs, and activities offered by the state and covered entities as provided to individuals who communicate in English. Language services are provided at no cost to LEP individuals. There are a couple of common words you will use when talking about or providing language services: interpretation and translation. Although they might sound similar, there is a difference. Interpreters provide verbal interpretation between you and LEP individuals. You will also use sign language interpreters when working with deaf or hard of hearing clients. Translators transform written communication from one language to another. Consecutive interpreting. It takes place when the LEP individual speaks and is followed by the interpreter's conversion of what was said to the English speaker. During this session, there are pauses or breaks between sentences when each person is speaking. In other words, the interpreter listens, then interprets.
Iti nagbabaitan ti pinagkukumong ket may palawag, nuanat kayat masawen iti sasaon nga naibaga digiti nagsarsarita.
1.
Simultaneous interpreting. The mode where the interpreter speaks almost at the same time as the source language speaker. The speaker does not have to pause and wait for the interpreter to interpret the part of speech that has been delivered. Thank you for meeting with us today. We will have you answer a few questions.
Nawatan mi ang sumbatan niyo dagitoy sa lutsod.
It requires listening, processing information, and speaking all at the same time. Sight translation. It is the oral rendition of text written in one language into another language. It refers to the process of reading a written document in the source language and immediately speaking the content aloud in the target language.
Kasunod ti ikabayag mo nga agigyan toy Hawaiian.
Makabulan.
When you work with LEP individuals, you may need to use interpretation and translation services so that all information to LEP individuals will be provided in a language that they can understand. An agency has flexibility in determining the appropriate type of language services provided, but must ensure the quality and accuracy of such services. This may include services provided by bilingual staff, arranging for contracted interpreters via telephone or in-person interpreter service, community volunteers, or obtaining translated versions of written communication like letters and forms. How to provide language services. Identify the need for language services.
Tôi bị đau cổ tay, tôi bị té, tôi đau cổ tay.
Can I help you?
Trời, đau quá.
Do you speak English? English?
English? No English.
Do you have anyone with you who could translate for you? This patient is in pain. He hardly speaks English, and I can't even get a basic medical history from him. Got any ideas?
Well, there's Boon Tan, our computer technician. She speaks an Asian language, but I'm not sure which one. Why don't I page her and see if she can help us out here? Hello, Boon Tan. We need your help. We have a patient here who speaks an Asian language, but we're not sure which one. What language do you speak?
I speak Thai.
Can you ask him what language he speaks and what his name is?
Alo, cổ tay tôi bị đau quá.
สวัสดีค่ะ คุณช่วยอะไรคะ
Tôi cần sự giúp đỡ. Càng lúc càng đau thêm. Dạ.
I'm sorry, he doesn't speak Thai. I think he's speaking Vietnamese.
Oh, okay. Thanks anyway, Boon Tan. Isn't Ms. Lay Vietnamese?
Yes, but she left for the day. Sir, will you please sign these forms?
Let's take him on back to get seen. Dr. Lepesh, this man doesn't speak much English. We have no medical history, just a signed consent for treatment. We think he may speak Vietnamese, but the only person we could have used to interpret was Ms. Lay, our receptionist, and she's gone for the day.
Đau. Đời đau.
Don't worry, sir. We'll take good care of you. We'll get an x-ray to start. An x-ray. Do you have any history of serious diseases or allergies to medication? Do you have any history of serious diseases or allergies to medication? Okay, we'll give you some medication to help with the pain.
Patient down in 12, stat! His pulse is faint and he's barely breathing.
Maybe it's a reaction to the codeine.
Now that we know why we must provide language services, but how do we determine who is an LEP individual, the right language to use, who can we use or should not use, and which services are appropriate? There are several ways this can be accomplished. First, how do we know who is an LEP person? The easiest answer is if they speak non-English language to us. But sometimes we will encounter an LEP individual who communicates with us in English. In this situation, we should listen for their grammar, sentence structure, listen to their pronunciation, ask questions requiring narrative response, or identify irrelevant responses. Using these methods can help you determine whether this individual is an LEP person and needs language assistance or not. Also, under the Hawaii Language Access Law, an individual can identify themselves as an LEP person when requesting language assistance. How do we identify the language spoken? A lot of LEP individuals will self-identify the language they speak or bring a helper who will do that for them. Some LEP individuals will show a I Speak card that identifies their spoken language along with their name. Here's an example of an I Speak card. The language poster or document is another good in-person resource. If they are unable to determine the LEP's spoken language, using a resource such as a language identification poster could be helpful. Most offices have a language identification poster or document of the most common non-English languages in Hawaii that allows LEP individuals to point to their spoken language. The language access poster example shows not only the English language name description, but also the non-English language description. In some situations, if an LEP individual is your former or current client, you may check their application or file to see if their preferred language is noted on the file. Here's an example of a Department of Human Services document that indicates the preferred spoken and written language. Remember, providing the wrong language does not get us any closer to communicating. Who can we use to interpret and translate? Who provides interpretation and translations? We discussed earlier that there are two types of language services, interpretation and translation. Let us start with the interpretation. When communicating with LEP individuals, we need to be sure that they understand everything we say and have a chance to ask us questions when they are uncertain about something. We also need to be confident that we have correctly assessed the LEP person's circumstances and needs so that we can make the appropriate action. To do this for LEP individuals, we must always use a qualified interpreter who is able to 1. Demonstrate proficiency in both English and in the target language. 2. Demonstrate knowledge of specialized terms or concepts. 3. Demonstrate an understanding of the need for confidentiality and impartiality. 4. Understand the role of interpreter. Same as written translation services, we should always use a qualified or certified translator if applicable to ensure the quality and completeness of the documents we translate. What about online translation? Even though there are many online translation tools or machine translation software available, however, please use them with high caution. The only way we can assure accurate and reliable results is to use qualified translators. Can we use our bilingual staff? Some of us might have noticed that our staff are just about as diverse in background as our LEP population. So, does that mean that our coworker, who is from the same country as an LEP individual, would be an appropriate resource to interpret or translate for us? In most cases, no. Even though there are probably some bilingual staff in your office, in most cases, they will use their language skills for cases they work themselves, or just to converse with an LEP individual who speaks the same language, but not as interpreters for others. They might not have the skills or understand both languages well enough to communicate effectively. Often, we will use a professional interpreter or translator through one of our contracted vendors, either by phone or in person, or through the list of registered interpreters from the judiciary to assist us with either interpretation or translation. Who should not be used to interpret or translate? Why didn't you pay your rent last month?
You didn't pay the rent?
I know we've seen it happen or overheard the conversations. Someone calls in or appears with an LEP individual to interpret the conversation. LEP individuals are in a hurry and in other settings might need to have someone with them to help bridge the language gap. Don't be tempted to use the resource they provide. Family members, friends, and children should not be used to interpret or translate for LEP individuals. Why not? There are a couple of important reasons. Confidentiality is the first important consideration. The LEP person before you may not really want the helper to know his or her business, fearing that it might be communicated to others in their community, but may not understand that this isn't necessary. The helper might not be emotionally able to handle sensitive information being conveyed. Also, often the laws, rules, or requirements are complex, and the helper may not fully understand or be able to communicate the importance of getting accurate information to both us and the LEP individual. This could result in unintentionally omitting or altering critical information. An adult telling a young child, "Please tell your parents they have to participate in a domestic abuse prevention program." The young child does not comprehend and is unable to translate to his or her parents. Finally, it isn't necessarily appropriate for children to know the level of detailed information we need to communicate with parents. Would you really want your 6th grader to oversee communicating your family dynamics and abuse situation to a social worker? Remember, use of a minor as an interpreter is permitted in emergency situations only. How to choose the most appropriate language service. For an unscheduled encounter. The most common situation when we encounter an LEP individual is when they come to our office. In this setting, using an on-demand interpreter via the telephone is the most effective way to communicate with an LEP individual. When working with a telephone interpreter in the open area, you will want to use a dual handset phone if you have one, or make other phone location arrangements so that both you and the LEP individual can hear and speak to the interpreter. The LEP individual will participate via one handset while you use the other with a dual handset. Another option is to use a speakerphone in a private room for more space, increased confidentiality, and to avoid disturbing coworkers. To use the services, you will need the interpreter service phone number and your agency's access code from your language access coordinator. Your language access coordinator can provide you with additional instructions on how to utilize the telephone interpreter service. If your agency does not have an account, your language access coordinator can set up an account with approved vendors from the SPO price and vendor list contracts. Once an account is established, your agency will have immediate access to telephone interpreter services 24/7. A phone call from an LEP individual. Like English speakers, many LEP individuals contact us via phone, either on their own or with help from a friend or family member. Those who call us directly will often request the language right away or cluing us into the need to connect an interpreter to the call. Others may have someone call on their behalf. Be very careful when using a LEP's friend or family member as an interpreter to avoid speaking to someone other than the LEP caller and breaching confidentiality. Follow the instructions for your telephone to start a conference call and then connect to the language service provider. Using the procedures in the telephone guide and telephone interpreter service utilization guide from your language access coordinator. When you need to place a call to an LEP individual for a scheduled or unscheduled conversation, you should engage your interpreter first so that the interpretation can begin as soon as the LEP individual answers the phone. Request a scheduled in-person interpreter for anticipated long time periods like interviews. Once you've established the need for an interpreter, consider the expected time needed to complete the meeting. In-person interpreters should be requested as soon as you know you'll need one because it requires advance notice. Follow your office procedures from your language access coordinator of the need for an in-person interpreter. Include the language, date and time needed, and client's name. If you need an interpreter for language that has various dialects such as Chinese or Filipino, be sure to determine which dialect the LEP individuals speak. Remember, providing the wrong dialect does not get us any closer to communicating. Learning to work effectively with an interpreter takes a little practice. You will use all the interview skills you have developed working with English-speaking individuals, but it is going to take more time. Because everything that is said during the interview must be said twice, the review that you would normally complete in about 20 to 25 minutes may take up to 40 to 50 minutes. There are a few things to keep in mind when working with an interpreter. First, the interpreter's task is essentially to work as a language conversion device. Interpreters should never assume the role of advocate or worker, but instead maintain status as a neutral third party. They should never filter what you or the LEP individual says during an interview or try to explain something you said in a different way if the LEP individual is confused. Confusion should lead the LEP individual to ask a question which will be interpreted back to you. Interpreters are hired for the scheduled meeting context, not to become the LEP individual's friend or helper. Let's look at a short video about preparing for an interpreted interview. It is important to be on the same page with the interpreter before you begin.
Bueno?
Good morning, Miss Garcia. This is Miss Avery from Children's Services.
Oh, okay.
One moment, please, okay? Un momento. I'm going to get an interpreter on the line to help us, okay?
Okay.
Welcome to Interpreter Services for the Administration for Children's Services. For Spanish, press 1. For all other languages, press 2.
Hi, this is Beatriz, number 22091. What is your phone access code?
ACSC08
Okay, what is your user ID number?
0820XX.
Okay, and how may I help you today?
Hi, this is Miss Avery with the Administration for Children's Services. I have a Spanish-speaking client on the line. Let's start.
Okay.
Miss Garcia?
Hello.
Hi, Miss Garcia, the interpreter is on the line
Okay.
and she will help us communicate.
Hola, me llamo Beatriz y seré su intérprete por el día de hoy. Oh, muchas gracias. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Miss Garcia, please speak directly to me and the interpreter will interpret what you say and what I say.
Ok, señora García, por favor hable directamente a la señora Avery y yo interpretaré exactamente lo que usted diga y lo que ella diga.
Okay.
Ok.
Miss Garcia, how are you? How are things with your daughter?
Ok, señora García, ¿cómo está? ¿Está todo bien con su hija?
Bueno, todo se está mejorando. Dolores está más calmada ahora.
Okay, everything is getting better, thanks. Dolores is much calmer now.
Great, Miss Garcia. I would like to arrange a follow-up home visit.
Qué bueno, señora García, me gustaría arreglar una visita a su casa.
Can I come by next Thursday about 3 p.m.?
Okay, ¿podría pasar por su casa el jueves en la tarde a las 3?
Bueno, sí, estaremos aquí el jueves que viene a las 3 de la tarde.
We will be here next Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m.
So I will see you next Thursday at 3 p.m. and I will have an interpreter with me.
Okay, qué bueno. So la veré a las 3 de la tarde el jueves en su casa y tendré un intérprete conmigo.
Pero también le quería preguntar sobre las sesiones de consejería para mi hija.
But I also want to ask you about counseling sessions for my daughter.
Sure. I'll bring some information about programs in Spanish and when I get there we can discuss the options.
Okay, sí. Yo traeré información acerca de los programas en español y podemos hablar de las opciones cuando la vean.
Okay, muchas gracias.
All right, thank you very much.
Miss Garcia, is there anything else I can help you with?
Oh, señora García, ¿hay algo más en que le pueda ayudar?
No me hace falta más nada.
No, I don't need anything else.
If you need anything, Miss Garcia, please call.
Okay, señora García, si necesita algo, por favor llame.
Okay, está bien, gracias.
Okay, thank you. Okay, señora García, buen día. Okay, Miss Avery, anything else I can help you with?
No, thank you. End call.
Okay.
When it comes time for the interview itself, remember you are in charge. You are the one conducting the interview, not the interpreter or the LEP individuals. Here's an example of interviewing with an interpreter.
This video will show you how to work with an interpreter if you need help speaking with another person in a different language. What is an interpreter? An interpreter makes it possible for two people who do not speak the same language to understand one another. The interpreter does this by listening to the words you say and orally translating them exactly into words in another language. Now we will show you some examples of how to and how not to work with an interpreter.
Tell her I need to ask her some questions so I can understand her situation better.
Stop. This is all wrong. To avoid confusion, speak directly to the other person as if he or she could understand you. Do not use phrases like he said, she said, tell him, tell her. This is how the conversation should go.
I need to ask you a few questions so I can understand your situation better.
Quisiera hacerle unas preguntas para ver si puedo entender la situación mejor.
Sí, gracias.
Yes, thank you.
Much better. Remember to always speak directly to the other person. Now, let's look at another example of how to work with an interpreter.
When did you initially move into the apartment?
¿Cuándo comenzó a vivir en el apartamento?
Pues en el 2006, no recuerdo exactamente. Creo que era en el invierno, estaba nevando. Creo que el 3 de enero, no, el 5 de enero.
It was in 2006, January 5th.
Freeze. First of all, the interpreter should repeat the words you say exactly as you say them. The interpreter should not add, leave out, summarize, or change anything to what you say. Let's try that again.
When did you initially move into the apartment?
¿Cuándo comenzó a vivir en el apartamento?
Pues en el 2006, no recuerdo exactamente. Tuvo que haber sido en el invierno, estaba nevando. Quizás el 3 de enero, no, el 5 de enero.
Well, it was 2006. I don't remember exactly, but it was winter. because it was snowing. I don't remember exactly. Maybe it was January 3rd. No, it was January 5th.
Much better. On to the next example of how to work with an interpreter.
Did you give a security deposit?
¿De un depósito de garantía?
¿Qué es eso?
Ella se refiere al dinero que está reclamando, lo que le pagó al dueño al principio, por si acaso se dañaba algo en el apartamento.
Hold it. If you don't understand the question, it is the job of the person asking the question to explain the question to you. It is not the job of the interpreter to explain the question to you. Let's see what should have happened.
Did you give a security deposit?
¿Usted pagó un depósito de garantía?
¿Qué es eso?
What is that?
Besides the rent, did you give the landlord any money before you moved in?
Además del pago del alquiler mensual, ¿le dio al propietario algún dinero antes de comenzar a vivir en el apartamento?
Now we're getting it. Let's look at one more example of how to work with an interpreter.
Did you take pictures before you moved out?
¿Tomó fotos antes de mudarse?
No, en realidad no se me ocurrió. No pensé que tendría ningún problema.
Qué pena, sin fotos no tiene caso.
Stop, stop, stop. The interpreter should never give his or her opinion on what is being said, nor offer you advice about it. Let's try that again.
Did you take any pictures before you moved out?
¿Tomó fotos antes de mudarse?
No, en realidad no se me ocurrió.
No, I didn't really think about it.
Now that you've learned the right and wrong way to use an interpreter, here are a few rules to remember. Speak loudly and clearly enough so that the interpreter can hear you well. Speak at a normal pace or a little slower if you are usually a fast speaker. You may stop from time to time if you feel the interpreter needs to catch up with you. Wait for the interpreter to finish talking before speaking. Always remember, everything you say will be interpreted. If there is something you do not want the other person to know, do not say it to the interpreter. Do not expect the interpreter to soften your words or the other person's. The interpreter must keep everything you say confidential. This means that he or she may not share anything that you say with anyone else. For more information, contact Legal Services of New Jersey. Thanks for watching.
So that's an example of how an interview with an interpreter should flow. In the course of an interview, it is likely you will review written material too. Whenever possible, copies of these items should be available in the language the LEP individual can read. This may be different than the language they speak. Early on, ask the LEP individual what language they read. If they cannot read their spoken language, determine the best language for written materials. Some may prefer English. Others may have someone in the home that can read the spoken language and will assist them with documents and other printed materials. If you receive a request for a translation of a document, please contact your language access coordinator who will help you determine an appropriate response to the requester. In interview procedures, the same procedure you use with English-speaking individuals would be utilized for the LEP individual, but through an interpreter. As you would with English-speaking individuals, providing them with all documents in their own language or read from the English version, and the interpreter will interpret. The interpreter will repeat what you say to the LEP individual and relay any questions or comments from the LEP individual to you. When LEP individuals can read their spoken language, they can refer to the translated copy while you read it through, and the interpreter interprets. Be certain to check for understanding and questions as you go over the documents. Finishing the interpreted face-to-face interview. When your interview is over, all questions have been answered and any translations the interpreter can assist with are complete, you will conclude by thanking the interpreter and seeing the LEP individual and the interpreter back to the reception area. Report any problems right away. In most cases, the process of obtaining interpreters, working with them for interviews, and providing translations works smoothly. Occasionally, you may have difficulty with a particular interpreter. Interpreters are expected to be fluent in both languages. They are also expected to act ethically and professionally. If problems arise with the interpreter, report the specifics of the issue, not just general comments, to your language access coordinator. Issues that are not reported cannot be addressed with the provider. Record the LEP encounter. It is also very important to document your effort and decision of the LEP individual to accept or decline the free language services offered by your agency. If service is provided, you should include language spoken by the LEP individual and date of language service provided. These records will be very helpful to the agency when assessing and monitoring language needs and implementation of language services. If free language services were offered by your agency and declined by the LEP individual, this also must be recorded by your agency. It is extremely important that we provide language services consistently. Yes, it takes a little time to connect with an interpreter or to have letters translated, but it is very important and it is the law. How would you respond if you arrived at work and your computer display was in a language you didn't understand? You'd probably need some help to figure out what went wrong. But what if the person who should be able to help spoke another language and responded to your question by looking confused or speaking more loudly or slowly in the language you didn't understand? Would that fix the problem? Of course not. The process may take additional effort on our part, but is necessary to provide meaningful access to our LEP Ohana and to meet our legal obligations. Where can I learn more about language services? To ensure meaningful access to your services, programs, and activities by LEP individuals, you should review and follow your Language Access Plan. A Language Access Plan is a document that explains how your agency provides appropriate language services to LEP individuals. It will also help ensure that your staff members are aware of what you do when they encounter an LEP individual. Please contact your Language Access Coordinator for more details about your Language Access Plan. If your agency does not have a language access plan in place, or it has not been updated for a while, it is a good time to create or update your plan because under HRS 321C-4, each state agency and covered entities shall establish a plan for language access and shall continue to file their language access plans with the Office of Language Access every 2 years. What should we consider when creating a language access plan? An agency should assess the level of language services it provides to LEP individuals by conducting an assessment using a 4-factor analysis. 1. The number or proportion of LEP individuals served or encountered in the eligible service population. 2. The frequency with which LEP individuals come in contact with your agency. 3. The nature and importance of your services, programs, or activities. And 4. The resources available to your agency. At minimum, a language access plan should utilize appropriate language data and assure consultation with stakeholders. Identify how language services will be provided. Identify vital documents to be translated. Identify ways to provide notice to LEP persons about language services. Provide for staff training. Include a plan to monitor and adjust services to assure meaningful access. For more information about language access or requesting technical assistance, please contact the Office of Language Access at doh.ola@doh.hawaii.gov or at 808-586-8730. The mission of the Office of Language Access is to address the language access needs of limited English proficient LEP persons and ensure their meaningful access to services, programs, and activities offered by the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of state government, including departments, offices, commissions, boards, and other state-funded agencies. OLA provides oversight, central coordination, and technical assistance to state agencies in their implementation of language access obligations, a civil right under both state and federal law. Please remember the process of providing language services may take additional effort on our part, but is necessary to provide meaningful access to our LEP Ohana and to meet our legal obligations. And most importantly, it is the right thing to do. That's the end of our presentation. Thank you for watching.